Good evening and welcome to Well Read, the University Libraries series that brings amazing Carolina authors with Carolina ties to all of you. My name is Elaine Westbrooks. I'm the Vice Provost and University Librarian at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Tonight, we have an amazing guest with us. We have Kristy Woodson Harvey, class of 2007, Carolina class of 2007, and she is the author of Under the Southern Sky. Kristy is New York Times, USA Today, Publishers Weekly, best-selling author of 7 novels. She's 2007 Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude, graduate of UNC Chapel Hill School of Journalism. Kristy's writing has appeared in numerous online and print publications, and her work has been optioned for film and television. She is the winner of the Lucy Bramlett Patterson Award for Excellence in Creative Writing, and also a finalist for the Southern Book Prize. And I'm really happy to say that just about a year, maybe 2 years ago, it's hard to say in the pandemic, but Kristy joined the Friends of the Library Board of Directors. And so we're just really happy to have her working with the libraries and supporting us. Kristy is joined today with her friend and fellow author, Megan Taylor. Megan is a Carolina 2008 graduate, and she's the owner of an award-winning calligraphy and hand lettering studio, All She Wrote Notes, which is based in Elon, North Carolina. She's also an author of The Happy Hand Lettering and Betty Confetti. So Kristy and Megan, welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. We're so excited for your conversation. And for those of you in Zoom land, if you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll be sure to leave time for your questions at the end of their lively conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Megan.
All right. Thank y'all so much for having me. Thank y'all for joining us today. Kristy and I are both huge Carolina fans and just such proud alumni. And it is a great day to be a Tar Heel, isn't it, Kristy?
It's every day is a great day to be a Tar Heel, but especially today.
So right. Well, we actually graduated a year apart, but we met a few years after graduation, actually in Chapel Hill. Do you want to tell them how we met?
Yes. This was so funny. So we were actually at a conference called Making Things Happen, and just randomly happened to sit beside each other, not once, but twice, which I think means that we were meant to be in each other's lives. And we were at the conference for very different reasons. I was working on getting my first book published, and that was my really big goal that I was trying to achieve. And Megan, what were you trying to do?
I was trying to take my hand lettering and calligraphy business full time.
And
here we are. I think we both achieved those goals and so many more than we ever could have imagined. I'm working on my brick and mortar studio here in town. Alongside my dad, we're doing construction every day, getting that ready to open in January of next year. And I've had 2 books, one on the way, and just so much life and so much joy has happened ever since then. You are just like lighting the world on fire over here with all these New York Times bestseller. It makes me so excited and so proud. We're just so thrilled. Things are working out for you, obviously.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's so funny to think back to when we met. I mean, it was probably I think it was like 7 years ago, and it sort of feels like yesterday, but to think about all of the incredible things that have happened, since then, and since that day, it's just been crazy. And I remember, so after we left that conference, we stayed in touch, and we used to talk every month about, our goals and like what we were doing. And I wish we still did, but the idea of us trying to find like 90 minutes to talk every month probably wouldn't work these days. But wow, it's so great to think about, how far we've come. And I think our amazing university and our fantastic library system, which is still helping me today, by the way, really had something to do with that.
I think so too. Those Carolina connections run deep. I'm sure y'all know, like if you have alumni friends, like whether you went to college with them or not, just that connection, like you're a part of a family. And I think it's just so awesome. Whenever I started getting my books out, you were just so helpful and you jumped in to help me and gave me so many great ideas and how to connect with libraries and how to get people to request my book at their library. And it's just been such a fun like family event, I feel like, for the last few years.
I totally agree. And I remember going on like my very first book tour and going to like big cities and being like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do? No one's going to come. And there is a UNC alumni chapter in like so many cities. And I remember it, you know, like calling up the heads and being like, can you please get people to come to my event? Because I don't know anyone. And it was great.
So the same thing happened to me. I was in Dallas for a book tour stop and there was a guy who waited in line and got me to write Go Heels like in his book. It was just so cool. Like,
I love
really
that.
are. I remember coming to see you in Farrington, like whenever, I don't remember if it was Dear Carolina or
it was Dear Carolina. It was my very first book. I like remember our outfits and our pictures. I was so excited.
It's amazing. Well, we are celebrating this beautiful baby, Under the Southern Sky, a New York Times bestseller. That is just phenomenal. And I love all of your books, but I get so excited every single time one comes out. And I was saving this one we went on vacation this past weekend. And so I was like saving it for vacation just so I could savor and like soak it in. And it did not disappoint. One of my very favorites. I like told her I was crying like late into the night last night. I just couldn't stop. I couldn't put it down.
Sorry.
So for those of us who are like, haven't heard about it yet, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes. So I am so excited this book is out in the world. It's actually something that I've been thinking about for a really, really long time, and a story that's been kind of in the back of my mind for years, actually. But it's a story about an investigative journalist named Amelia, who's working on a story about what people do with their leftover frozen embryos, which was actually something that kind of got sparked at Chapel Hill, but I'll tell you about that later. And she is snooping around a doctor's office and she accidentally comes across this list of embryos that have been deemed abandoned. And she realizes that there's a name that she knows on that list, and that is the name of her childhood friend Parker and his late wife Greer. And so she knows she's going to have to tell Parker that his embryos, you know, are kind of or have been abandoned, and what happens to them is sort of up in the air. And she's really not looking forward to it. And so then Parker, of course, is put in this situation to have to decide what to do with what is effectively the last remaining part of this woman that he loves so much. And so the story is told from 4 perspectives. It's Amelia, the journalist, Parker, the father of the embryos. We get to see Greer, who is his late wife, through her journal entries. And then Elizabeth, who's one of my favorites. She is Amelia's good Southern meddling mama. And she has to put her 2 cents in. So each of the characters in this story has a secret. And as those secrets unravel, what ultimately ends up happening to these embryos is determined. So it was a really, really fun book to write. And, you know, I think every time I write a book, I learn a little something new about myself. I learn a little something more about writing. And you, Megan, I mean, now you've written a hand lettering book, a children's book, and you're working on a devotional, right?
Yeah. So
that's a lot of things.
I have a lot of catching up to do to you over there. But I mean, it's amazing. I would tell you as a little kid, I would have loved to have been a writer. Like I won like a creative writing competition in 3rd grade, like not to brag, but they laminated my book in the library.
That's amazing.
So really early on was dreaming very big, but I went about my hand lettering, like went about my products and selling everything online. And then I got approached by a publisher to write Happy Hand Lettering, which was my first book, just about like what I teach and what I do, like how to transform your handwriting. So that one was very like, I knew everything to say. I had been teaching, I've taught 10,000 people in person. I knew, exactly how that one would go. And then that was a lot easier to write, but it's a more like technical, it isn't like a beautiful novel that you want to like snuggle up with. But then Betty Confetti is my children's book. And that was like my dream. Like that's the one that I wanted to write so bad. And that was, it came easier, but it was just so much more important to me. Like I wanted to get it exactly right. Like I mean, you only have a few words in a kid's book, and there's got to be a certain number of syllables and rhymes and all these things when you get into it. And so that to me is like my legacy. It's the most important one that I've ever done. And I hope I get to do a lot more of the children's books, especially with her. They made a little doll to go along with the story.
She's so cute.
That was really cool. But that's been awesome. And then I'm working on a devotional now. It's like 100-day devotional about praise and positivity. I think coming out of 2020, people just really need hope and they need joy, and they just need something to encourage them and inspire them. And speaking of inspiration, where do you get your inspiration? Like what inspired this book, but then your other ones that you have done as well?
Well, this book in particular, I mean, sometimes I feel like I just kind of dive in and I start writing and I don't really know what's going on. But for this one, I can actually kind of pinpoint when was the moment when I was like, yes, okay, I think I'm going to write this story. And so it was really probably 5 or 6 years ago. It was right when my first book was coming out, Dear Carolina. And I had a friend who came to me at a party, and she had just had twins via IVF. And she said, we have these leftover frozen embryos and we have to decide what to do with them. And we never thought about this. And she said, a lot of women are going to be going through this. A lot of couples are going to be going through this, and you should write a book about it. And I was like, yes, I should. That's such a great idea. But my second book was already finished. And then I actually got contracted for the Peachtree Bluff series, like sort of out of the blue a little bit. It was not something I was planning on writing, but an editor asked me to write a series. And I, of course, said yes right away to that, and kind of came up with that. And then Feels Like Falling was something that was already finished. So it came out after that series. And so I was really sort of sitting down to think, okay, what am I going to do next? And this was definitely like top 3 or 4 on my list of ideas of things that I knew I wanted to write about. I knew I was going to, keep going with, and something that I really felt like I was supposed to write. And I was actually talking to a friend a few days earlier about, these like 4 different story ideas that I had, one about these frozen embryos, and one about a man whose life doesn't go according to plan, and he decides to hire a surrogate and become a single father. And she called me a few days later and she was like, I don't know if you were looking for a sign, but I think I have one for you. And I was like, okay. And she had just delivered her first baby. And she was in PA school. She delivered a baby, and she said the father of this child used a surrogate to have the embryos that he had frozen with his late wife before she died. And I was like, whoa.
I have chills from head to toe.
That's crazy. And it was like these 2 different things that I was thinking about writing kind of mashed together. And of course, the story really went from there, but I knew right away, like, yes, that's what I'm going to write. And I remember saying to her, but in my version, and I won't say what, because it kind of ruins the story.
Spoiler, we don't want to give a spoiler.
Yeah. But it was more than any other book I've written. I was like, okay, this is definitely a story that I think I'm supposed to tell. It just felt like all the pieces fell into place. And when I sat down to start writing it, it just came so easily, sort of like what you were talking about. It's something that has just been in the back of your mind. It's a story that you knew. But there's so many things. I mean, for people who have read this book, like Aunt Tilly ends up being one of my favorite characters in this book. She ends up being really important. I didn't know she was going to be in this book, and she appears on like page 2, so it's amazing the things that when you sit down, what you think is going to happen, and then what ultimately ends up happening as that story takes over is just really, exciting and interesting to get to see. And, I don't know, it was a really weird time for me to write a book. It was, we had Hurricane Florence had just come through here. We were living like all over the place. We were like moving around. I think we moved like, 11 times or something, where our house was being fixed. And so there was so much craziness in my life while I was writing this book. And so to be able to like just come to the page and to this story was sort of my saving grace. And then of course, we moved right into COVID. And so it was definitely an interesting, I will never forget writing this one. That is absolutely for sure. But, I think some of what we do is really, really different, and some is the same, but overall we're both working in a really creative field in different ways. And so what inspires you, and maybe more to point, what inspired you during this crazy, crazy year where everything, or I guess longer than a year, however long.
Oh, I know. I keep being like, oh, last year. I'm like, oh, we're still in it.
It's still, yeah. But how do you stay inspired and upbeat? And I mean, because you're really having to, be creative every single day.
Yes, that's such a good question. I think for me, like I've always known my mission was spreading happiness through my handwriting. Like I always have known that when I'm posting online, when I'm showing up, when I'm creating products, it's all with that positivity and like with that hope to make people happy or make them smile. And I felt like for the first time during COVID, that felt like a job, like not in a bad way, but in the way that like, hey, you've been telling people for 7 years that you're about happiness and positivity. Now people need your happiness and their positivity. Like they're coming to me for that. And so it felt like I had to like process my own feelings and my own emotions, but then wanting to give something back and give to people and give them hope, give them encouragement, give them like a bright light at the end of the tunnel. And not that like is an impossible feat, but like we're all going through some stuff together. And I just loved that I had that opportunity and that was on me to like, that came very natural to me to like share, cute graphics and cute quotes and uplifting messages and just trying to find silver lining on things for us and our family. When it first hit that in March, we lost 60% of my business revenue because I was doing in-person live events. I was traveling all around the world, like all around the South, especially teaching these hand lettering workshops live. And I would have told you, like, I loved that. That was like my dream. I would go on little tours and decorate my car with confetti. And it was awesome. But all of that, I came to a halt. And we really had to stop and reevaluate, like, hey, what does this look like going forward? Like, what are our dreams? Like, what does the future look like? And my husband was furloughed for a few months. And so even though like we were not spared by the COVID stress by any stretch, it gave us that space and that time to think like, okay, if I could do anything, like my business has been turned upside down. If I could do anything, what would I do? And I wanted a space. I wanted to move out of my house. I wanted to have classes here, like in my town, so that I didn't always have to travel. I could bring people here. And so I bought a building and we started working in construction and we started building and making it exactly what we need. And it's going to have a classroom and it's going to have a little storefront and it's going to be like a fun destination. And like, if I had never slowed down, like during that time, if I had never like taken a breath long enough to think about what I wanted the future to be, I would have just kept going like I was going. And I think I would have burned out. And so I'm just so grateful for the blessings that were hidden in there, like not to take away from, I know it was a hard year. I know it was so much loss and so much grief and things that people went through. But my specialty, if you will, is trying to turn your mistakes into confetti, like trying to turn your hard things into good things. And so we really did just make the best out of it. And so I'm really, really grateful for that.
Yeah, it was a crazy time. And I was thinking about you and all the classes that you do. And I was in a sort of similar spot because I guess everything closed down like March 17th, 15th, whenever it was. And we were actually in Colorado. And I remember being like, do we go? Do we not go? Do we go? Do we not go? What if we don't get home? And now I'm like so glad we went because little did we know we were going to be sitting in our house for the next 15 months. But no, we got home and I had a book coming out April 20th. And I remember talking to my manager and having these like Zooms with my team at my publishing house and being like, well, I mean, by April 20th, like everything's going to be totally back to normal. I mean, this is going to last like 2 weeks. And then that thing of like, that started happening of like, oh my gosh, it's not going to be back to normal. And I was panicking because I thought, what am I going to do? How am I possibly going to sell books? I sell books because I go on tour and I go to bookstores and I speak at luncheons and I go meet people and I sign their books. And, what am I going to do? And I was really, and not only that, but I think, I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think not only just like the people that you're in front of, but it gives you a way to be talking about that book day after day after day after day after day. That's reminding people like the book is out, you should buy it. That's not like the book is out, you should buy it. It's like, here I am at this really cool place with these fun people, and I just didn't know what to do. And I remember like 3 days before the book came out, being on Zoom with my publishing team and then being like, we've never launched a novel during a pandemic. Like we have no idea, good luck. And I mean, I truly like got a Zoom account and was hosting the Zooms that I was speaking at, like for the bookstores. Cause they were like, we don't know how to do it. And, so I totally get that because there was just a lot of, and my husband's a dentist. And so he was completely closed for like 12 weeks. And so we were at home together. Will was doing school from home and he was home and we were all home. We were together and it was crazy. And I was trying to like pull off this virtual tour that we planned in like 6 days. And it was very, very bizarre. And I don't know about you, but I had a really hard time at the beginning. Like I was lucky that I was getting ready to go on tour because I didn't have any actual writing due. All I had was just some editing. And I remember like, it was something really easy, like line edits, that should just not take, it's like, accept, reject. It should not take a long time. And I remember my editor sending them and being like, oh, if you could have these back to me. And, some amount of time that I thought was insane. I was like, I'll have this done in like 2 days. Oh my gosh. I mean, I just could not, I would look up and I would be like, I've been doing this for 2 hours and I'm through like, what is wrong with me? So I just felt very like, I don't know, but I think by the time the tour was over and I was sort of ready to get back to it and actually ended up writing 2 books this year, which was good. And I think it gave me something to do.
Over there, putting out albums during the pandemic.
Well, I think I don't know about you, but I think that's my like diversion technique. I was like, I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to be super busy. Did you do that at all?
I went into like product creation. So for me, like we have a website with a lot of items and I have wholesale stuff that's sold everywhere. So I just was like designing and making and like creating. And I had a book coming out. Betty Confetti came out February 2nd. And so she was done, but it was just like, I think I was just discouraged and like a little defeated that like I didn't get to go on a tour and like didn't get to launch her the way that I had done before, but it just made me so grateful for what I was able to do last time and hopeful for what I'll be able to do in the future. So what do you have coming up next? Like, what are you excited about in the future?
Well, so I do have a new book coming out in October, which is nuts. I'm like, what was I thinking? No, I'm really excited. I got to go on like a little baby tour for Under the Southern Sky. It was, we had to plan a tour because we had to pretend like the pandemic was going to be over because, 9 months ago, we planned them like 9 to 12 months out. We had no idea. I mean, so we just had to assume the pandemic was going to be over. Things were definitely better, but I didn't go anywhere that wasn't in the South. And I just did a driving tour. So it was like a little loop. I still haven't been on an airplane. Probably soon, but I know I'll be on one in August, if not before, but that was really fun. And I feel like it kind of like eased me back in a little bit, but those first few days I was like, oh my gosh, like, is this okay? There are all these people.
I know. I have a hard time too, without being able, like I smile so big and I'm like, if you can't see that, like, I feel like you lose a lot of what I'm trying to put out, and then if I can't see their face, like I had like a breakdown and I was like, oh, they're not having fun. They don't like this. I don't know what they're feeling. I can't like read their emotions or like read their fun. I get in the car and I'm like, I don't know if they liked it. I don't know if they had fun. That was wild.
It's bizarre. I know. But so that was really good. And, but so in the meantime, like, I guess during the pandemic, one of the sort of common themes that kept popping up is, I mentioned that Peachtree Bluff series that I had written, and I just got so many requests for more of the Peachtree Bluff series, which I think really makes sense because I think people wanted to go back somewhere that was familiar and like they felt safe and cozy and at home. And I had, that had been pretty consistent, like from the time I wrote the first one, but it had then been a full year since the last book had come out and I was still getting all these requests. And it was actually so great. I don't know who it is, but I should like write her a note, but I was doing an event with Simon & Schuster actually for another author. And people kept asking like, is Kristy going to write more Peachtree Bluff? And so when I pitched the idea, I think they were already like pretty primed, but we were having this, look at you. You're so good. I have nothing. I have like no props with me tonight. I don't know what I'm doing.
They are.
But I just thought, what do I want to do right now? And my 2022 book was finished and I was like, what do I want to do? And it was getting to be the holiday season. And I thought, this is kind of sad. And It's not exactly like a normal Christmas. And as I was like, I'm going to write the Christmas that I wish we were having. And so it was so fun. And so I'm really excited. Christmas in Peachtree Bluff comes out October 26th. And then I have a book coming out in 2022. I would like to tell you the title, but I'm not exactly sure. It was going to be The Wedding Veil, but now I'm changing my mind a little bit.
Okay.
But it's about this wedding veil that it's a real life wedding veil that was worn by Edith Vanderbilt, who was like the first mistress of Biltmore. And so her grandmother, her mother, her sisters, and she all wore it. And then Cornelia, her daughter, wore it, and then it disappeared. So it's sort of my answer. It's a contemporary historical story about like
very cool
what happened to the wedding veil. So I don't know if it's going to be called The Wedding Veil, but I'm really excited. But actually, so I'm almost finished with that one, like with the editing and all of that. So I'm really excited to just start writing again. I like really miss writing so much. So, I mean, what about you? What are you working on now?
I've got the devotional is turned in, the manuscript is turned in, but we haven't started going through edits. We have finally settled on the cover design, which, can be like
really hard.
There's some lows. There's a lot.
This has happened to me twice now. Wait, I just have to back this up.
I know what you're
No, well, I've like picked a cover and been like, this is it. It's perfect. And they're like, we're so excited. And they come back and they're like, sales doesn't think it's the right cover. And I'm like,
sales ruins everything. Remember that time yours came out and then there was like another person that had the
exact same cover.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me, you cannot do that. Like someone else had your picture. But then, so like, I'm an artist. So like, I design it and I like give it to them and it's great. And then they make changes and you're like, you Photoshop my handwriting and it's a handwriting book. Like you can't do that.
Can't change my handwriting.
That's always a journey, but I love every single one of them. But I mean, you got to look at it, for a long time. So you got to make sure that you're committed to that. And then I should move into the studio in September, and then I'll move just in time to ship like all of the Christmas orders and all that kind of stuff. And then planning to open up in January for classes. But then I haven't announced this yet, but I'm going to go on a little tour in August. And it's like, we're not going to officially call it this, but it's totally the COVID comeback tour. It's like all the places I had to cancel on. At the beginning of March and April, we've like been behind the scenes, like working with the stores to be able to reschedule those. And so we're going to do like a week-long stint and hit up all North Carolina stops this time. I'm going to Dallas Market and doing some appearances there in a couple weeks. And so that'll be my first like venture out, to the real world, to another state in a long time. But I'm looking forward to that too. So
that's going to be great. Well, I wanted to ask you too. So, I think you mentioned this, you really hit on this, and you have always been like really clear on, why you're doing what you do. And so maybe you've already answered this, but I kind of want you to expound upon it a little bit. And I think in a year like 2020, we really truly realized how important people's joy is. Yeah. And I don't think that was something that I took for granted. Like, it wasn't that I didn't think it was important, but maybe I just didn't think it was enough, And so when people would say like, well, why do you do what you do? Why are you doing what you're doing? I mean, my only real answer would just be that like, I love it, but what else really drives me? And I kind of realized this year that like making other people happy for a few hours is enough. I mean, in the past year, it was sort of everything. And so people would write me and say, oh my gosh, like for 3 days, I totally forgot that I was like going through this terrible thing. And I was like, yes, like that is good enough, because people are so busy and they're so, all over the place. And especially in a year where everything is different and everything's turned upside down, I think it's so important that we give people something to look forward to. And so I know you hit on this a little bit, but like, what drives you? Why do you do what you do every day?
For me, it's coming from like everything I have been through, like to get me to where I am. It just gives me a stronger sense of purpose and resilience. Like, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I got married and divorced when I was 21 and 22. Just so many failures in life that like made me so ashamed and so discouraged and so down. But that really gave me the strength and the resilience to build the life that I have now. Like there was a time in my life that I was so sad that I felt like I had ruined everything, that I had made all the mistakes, that everything fell apart. But it was the other side of that, that everything that God had waiting for me now, like with a family and a life and a son and a business. And it's just, I'm so grateful for it. And I wake up every day just so happy and so glad that I survived everything that I did before. And I feel like if I can use that, and I can use that sense of purpose and that joy that is just like deep within my bones because I've been given a second chance at life, to reach out and inspire other people, that happiness is like an inside job, that you need to fill your cup so that you can take care of anybody else around you. And I think where that stood out the most in COVID, all these women were expected to do the impossible. Like, there are other jobs. Like, if your kids are home, like, they're not usually, not for all of us. Like, usually there's like your job and then a school job. And then you used to be able to go to restaurants and eat. You didn't have to cook at your house.
Well, and for like a long time, there wasn't even like, I mean, takeout, because you were like, oh, well, if I get takeout, like I'm going to get this thing and die. I mean, there, it was terrible.
Time. And I think just being able to just reinforce my purpose of like looking for the good, like looking for whatever you can find, whatever you can cling to, like the confetti in the midst of it, right? Like confetti is just trash that chose a happier life. Like that's what I tell people. And so you might be in some trash, but you need to be digging for some confetti. And so looking for the good, it was never more important to me than this past year. And that just fired me up. That gave me a greater sense of like what I'm here for and what God put me on this earth to do. And, it really it's been an honor to be able to share that with people and to open up more, and to write that book, 100 Days of Praise and Positivity, that came out of this season.
Yeah.
And just some of the things are things I wish somebody would tell me, or I wish I had heard, or just like little lessons I've learned along the way. And I just hope that will be an encouragement to people. Please, Lord, don't let us ever have to do this again.
Oh, God,
but,
I know.
But I think 2020 was not the worst year of my life. 2009 was the worst year of my life. And so I think when you've survived a year, I'm sure 2020 was the worst for a lot of people. And when you have survived something like that, you go through the rest of your life with a totally different perspective. You just see it through a different lens, and you don't take things for granted anymore. And so I think
but I think you're a real example of how to do that, because I think sometimes people go the complete opposite way and, never able to recover from that. So I think that's like really amazing. And I do think that we're at this point now where we're all starting to come out of this enough where we can see like, okay, this was really hard, but like this good thing happened and this good thing happened. And I do have to say, I have to just give a shout out to like a really great thing that happened to me, because I'm sure a lot of our participants on here tonight are from this. But when, I was talking about trying to prepare for this book tour and like having no idea what to do. And Mary Kay Andrews, who's another author, sent out this group text one night and said like, oh my gosh, none of us are going on tour. What do we do? She's really funny. And she's like, let's get on Zoom and drink and complain, What else are we going to do? So we all got on Zoom one night and we were just talking, and we complained for a while, and then we laughed, and then we strategized. And then we were like, hey, what if we all get on Facebook and we go live on all of our pages and we talk to our readers, and we just do this. We talk about, whatever we decide. Like one night we'll talk about, how to get published. And one night we'll talk about our new books, and, we'll do it one night and just see what happens, because we can't reach our readers right now. And so we did, and we didn't think anyone was going to show up. And it was Mary Kay Andrews, Kristen Harmel, Patty Callahan Henry, Mary Alice Monroe, and we went live that first night. And I think like 1,000 people showed up for us that first night, which was absolutely insane.
That's amazing.
And we just kept getting all these notes from people saying like, please keep doing this. This was so fun. I got to laugh for 45 minutes. And we were like, okay, we're going to do this for 7 weeks, because by then all of our books will be out. And certainly this pandemic mess will be far over and behind us. And we'll just do this and have fun. And oh my gosh, we're like 15 months into it, or 14 months into it now. And it's just been this incredible community. I think we're almost at like 50,000 members, which is just absolutely insane. And we've had some really amazing authors on and gotten to talk to so many great people. And I think our purpose began, like we wanted to, not only promote our books, but we really wanted to talk about our independent bookstores and our libraries and all these places that are so important to us. And really it ended up becoming something so much bigger because I think it became this place where no matter what was going on, people could go online, especially people that were like really, truly stuck in their homes, and could meet friends and like talk to other people. And that was actually one of the most rewarding experiences for me of going on this tour, was watching some of these people who had known each other online for like over a year, but they'd never met each other. And they would come to an event and they met in real life. And it was like the craziest thing because they were like best friends, but they'd never met each other before. So, I mean, I do think that we're definitely, we're starting to see those little silver linings and those little happy bits and pieces and of course, again, it's like you said, I mean, it was horrible, and the loss of life and just everything, but I do think that we have to kind of look for the silver lining, a little bit. But switching gears a little bit, we're here today because of UNC Library. And so I wanted to know if you could tell me anything about what the libraries meant to you and your college career.
Yes. So I was a big library fan, but not until second semester freshman year. First semester, I did not realize like how much you actually had to like read the books and like study. Like I had made 3 C's my freshman year, and I was like a straight A student, and my parents were about to like pull me out of Carolina. They were like, you need to go to class. Like you need to like get to work. And so I started, I'm an Enneagram 7, like people. Like I love to talk and socialize, but you can't like really like everybody at the library is like on a mission. And so I got an iPod, like the original like OG iPod with like headphones, and I would go in there and study at the undergrad library or at Davis, and it was just so nice to like have that like focus, space, and time, and it gave me the sense of like I was with people, but I was alone. And so that filled my cup so much, to the point that like I live in Alamance County now, and I'm just like a big fan of like our local libraries, and I really miss being able to go and do that because I work from home. So like to be able to go and visit and do that during COVID. But I had a great time at Carolina, but the libraries are the reason I got to stay at Carolina all 4 years.
That's important.
You.
I really liked the undergrad library too, for that exact same reason. I don't know which Enneagram I am. I need to find that out, right?
I think you're a 3 or a 4.
Oh, okay.
You're super driven, and you're very artistic and creative. And you're in the New York Times list, so like, that's like near.
Well, I'll figure it out and I'll let you know. But I really liked the undergrad too, because I like to be with people. And even now, like, I don't have to be in some perfect, like, quiet space to write. I wrote several of my books like in Starbucks. I mean, with like people around and no headphones, and I need like noise and people. And like we've been doing construction on our house for like 7 months, and people are like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, doing what? Like, I don't even notice it. It's like just in the background. I don't know. So I loved that about the undergrad, because there was like always something going on. People were walking in and out. It wasn't totally quiet.
Yeah.
But the libraries have also been so helpful for me during all of this, because I was writing a historical novel during a pandemic, which was not my plan. My plan was, I'm going to be like in the libraries. I'm going to be at Biltmore. Like, I'm going to be in here, like doing all this research. And no, I wasn't doing any of that. So if it weren't for libraries and people who were sending me things, it would have been very, very difficult. So thank you to the libraries then and now. And moving forward, we're very grateful. Megan and I are very grateful that we got through Chapel Hill because of you.
Yes. Thank you. So we have some questions in the chat. So I want to go through those with you. And then if anybody else has questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And if we have time, we'll get to those as well. They'll keep feeding them to us. Mm-hmm. So the first question is, what are you both reading right now and loving?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. Okay. So, so many things. I am actually reading a book right now called Lizzie and Dante by Mary Bly, who also writes as Eloisa James. And it's a wonderful, so it's like technically romance, which isn't a genre that I read a whole lot, but it's like, it's very smart and it's very good. And it's about this woman, you know, who like meets this man on the Italian coast. It's like the perfect summer escape right now. It's really great. The next thing I'm reading is The Forest of Vanishing Stars by my friend Kristen Harmel. I cannot wait. That one's going to be really great. I sort of like switch it up a little bit. So that one will probably be like a little more serious. But I've read so many great books already this year. And that's one of the great things about Friends of Fiction is I get to read so many books early because we get to read them before, you know, the guests come on the show. So I feel like I just am reading constantly. I'm trying to think what I like just finished. Oh, I just finished this book called A Special Place for Women by an author named Laura Hankin. And it was her second book. I loved her first book too. No, it's her third book. But it's about the secret society of women in New York City that has this kind of like dark underbelly. And it's totally not what you think.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. So you have like a lot of fiction, like a lot of like.
Yes, I do. I'll tell you what I do. So I love nonfiction too, but I listen to a lot of nonfiction.
I was going to say that. So I love to listen to like business books or like autobiographies. Like I love when the author will like read, like Matthew McConaughey, like I've had his book on lately.
Just finished Green Lights.
Yes, Green Lights. Jamie Kern Lima, like I've been listening to her.
Oh my gosh, I love her.
Yeah. So
yes, I actually read that one, but we have the same publishing house, and I was so excited because they sent it to me early, and I was like, I'm like a super fan of hers now. Like I'm like on her email list, and like I went to her, like her thing, like her conference thing.
It's so good. And then I read your book, like obviously just finished that. And then I loved Kendra Adachi. She wrote this book called The Lazy Genius Way. And it was just a good like COVID book for me, like around the home, like just like hacks about like life and like how to just do things more efficiently and how to be, she always says like a genius about things that matter and lazy about the things that don't. And so I just really enjoyed her book a lot. She's a Carolina fan and she's a North Carolina girl, but I think she went to Elon or somewhere around here, but she lives in Greensboro. So I'm like,
I need to read that.
Yes. The Lazy Genius Way. And she has like a podcast and like all that kind of stuff too. So that's what I've been, Matthew McConaughey and you and her. It's a great
mix
of people. The next question is about this book, Under the Southern Sky. How did you decide to use journal entries for Greer to continue to tell her story? Did you find the journal entries harder to write? And if so, why?
Okay, so I knew that I wanted Greer to be a part of this story for a lot of reasons. For one thing, I knew it's really hard to write about someone who dies when they're young and not make them a complete saint. But you can't make her a complete saint or the story just doesn't work, because how can anyone move on from that? How can anyone ever take her place, etc.? So I knew she was going to have to be in this book in some way, shape, or form. And so I played with some different things, and I had a lot of nerves about, trying to do these journal entries and writing this perspective from kind of beyond the grave, because sometimes that can turn out a little bit hokey. And I wasn't really sure, if that would work or not. So the first one that I actually wrote is the one where, if you've read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, hopefully you'll want to, but it's the journal entry where Greer is saying goodbye to her embryos. And I remember writing it and really feeling like, okay, she really needs to be a part of this story. I think this is really important. Like, how do I put her in here? And I had talked to my agent about it. Like, do I keep her in? Do I put her out? What do I do? And I remember sending her that journal entry and she was like, oh yes, we put her in. Like, this is definitely going to work. So, it's always one of those things where you're just trying to like figure out the very best way to do something. And I was nervous about having a book that had 4 points of view. I mean, I'd never done that before, but it was very easy. And I was like very clear in my mind about who each one of these people were. And, that it was important for them to be in the story. So, I was definitely nervous about it, but actually she ended up being one of my favorite perspectives to write, because I love to write the parts where the characters are in their own heads. That's my favorite thing. Like, dialogue's fine, the action's fine, but I really want to know what they're thinking and like what makes them tick. So for me, it was like a dream scenario, because I got to write this character who is in her own head for the whole story. So
that's really interesting perspective to hear you say that because it comes across just like that. And like, I think all of your books, like the characters feel like you want to be their friend. Like, I feel like in every one, it's like, oh, I would be friend. That's who I would be friends with. Like that reminds me of my friend, like this person, or like, that's like this. And you did a great job with her specifically of making her like likable and lovable, but not to anyone else's like downfall. Like you're great, but you're not like that great. You're like,
right, exactly. And that's what I was trying to do.
You're not irreplaceable. But it was amazing. You did such a good job. I really like this question. Would you ever want or consider bringing characters from previous books, like Peachtree Bluff characters, into new books, maybe even just as minor characters, not necessarily protagonists?
So I love this idea, and I can't tell you why I don't do this. I mean, and for that matter, I'm like, why do I not take minor characters that I find really fascinating from old books and make them protagonists in new books? Like, why do I not do that? So I don't know why I don't do that, but I should probably start. I think it's an excellent idea. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, why not?
I was reading, like, it was a Jasmine Gilroy book, and I read a book, and then they were at a wedding, and one of the guests at a wedding was like someone from the like.
And you're like, yeah, exactly. I know.
I love that.
And I would have done that because Under the Southern Sky and Feels Like Falling are both set in Cape Carolina. I 100% would have put Gray and Diana in this story, but I didn't change it to Cape Carolina until like, I mean, the book was like way finished, like way too late for me to be like, oh, let me throw in a little cameo by these ladies. Or I would have done that. But
so obviously you live in Beaufort, but what Cape Carolina, is there like a city that you're like imagining when you write?
Yeah. And it changed a little bit. So when I was writing Feels Like Falling, I originally, which was my 2020 book, like what year? I originally had set it in Morehead City, which is a real place. It's like right over the bridge from Beaufort. I mean, I know you know that, but just in case there's someone out here that doesn't know that. But then after writing the Peachtree Bluff series, I was like, man, it sure is fun to make a place up because it's just convenient. You know, you can like, I can throw a restaurant right there, or like, oh, the beach is only a minute away. Sure. Why not? You know,
you don't have to like fact check anybody.
Right. I don't have to be like, oh, well, that won't work because it's too far. Or like, you don't have to do any of that. But I did throw in some places that are real that people kind of recognized, which was really fun. But so then when I was writing Under the Southern Sky, we were actually living at this house during, like, we were out of our house, part of the time we were out of our house. And it was on the end of this peninsula, and it was so pretty. And it was over on in Atlantic Beach in a place called Hoop Hole Creek. And there were definitely like parts of Atlantic Beach that I had put in Feels Like Falling. And I was just really inspired by that setting. And I was like, yes, the end of this peninsula, although fictionalized, grander, different, is going to be, you know, where I set this next book. And so I had originally called it something else, and I just didn't love it. Like, it just wasn't like clicking with me. And so I was talking to some friends who actually helped me name Cape Carolina. Like, we all sat around a dinner table one night and we're like, I was like, okay, everybody throw their stuff out. And we just like threw out stuff until we came up with Cape Carolina. And they were like, why don't you use Cape Carolina again? It's like basically the same place that you were talking about before. Just use it again. So I was like, yeah, great. Why not?
I feel like you need some like Cape Carolina merch, like how there's like Stars Hollow, like sweatshirts you can buy. Like, I feel like you need like, I know where this place is. This is legit.
Do you know anybody that could like write it for me? Or
I feel like I know this girl who makes really cute stuff. You have some more questions. Let's see. Oh, you kind of touched on this about Friends in Fiction. Just so much praise for Friends in Fiction. They love it. They're so grateful for it. It's their best thing that happened to me in the past year. Do you all plan on continuing that like after the pandemic?
Oh, yes. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I can't say for sure what it's going to look like, but we're getting ready, like June 23rd, and 24th, we're doing our first in-person live events here in Beaufort, which is going to be so great. But yeah, totally. I mean, it's changed our lives for sure in like a really big way. And, you know, I sometimes will talk about it. I think, you know, you can look at it and like be like, oh, they're live for an hour on Wednesday nights. But as you well know, a lot of things that look it's sort of like how you're live teaching that class for an hour, but it took you 10 times that long to prepare. And, so there is a lot that goes into producing this show every Wednesday night. So, I don't know. I think that probably the way that we do it will change slightly, but yeah, we're definitely we're all in. I mean, it's definitely going to keep going. We love it. And, stay tuned. So we'll see.
So for your fourth installment of Peachtree Bluff, so I think she's talking about the Christmas book.
Yeah.
Do you pull from personal experience of going through a hurricane? She said she's been through a lot of hurricanes and she's interested to see if you'll write about that.
Oh yeah. So, and that was really the impetus for writing this story. I was I lived through this craziness of this hurricane. I've been in a lot of hurricanes, but this was definitely the most life-altering one. And I was I need to write about this. I just need to put this somewhere. But for a while, it's kind of like the pandemic. For a while, you're I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. That's the last thing I want to talk about, Yeah. And then you get to a point where you're oh, I can kind of see the good things that came out of it. I think I can write about this now. And I just knew if I was going to write about a hurricane that it had to be a Peachtree Bluff book. And so in the beginning of this story, Vivi, who is Caroline's 15-year-old daughter, who you see in the previous 3 books, but she's younger, is kind of having some, teenager stuff, she's just not going through her best time. Mm-hmm. And she's supposed to be going on a trip with Jack and Ansley, who are her grandmother and step-grandfather, but ends up getting upset about something and running away and gets them trapped in Peachtree Bluff during the storm of the century. So they are actually living out, this major monster storm, in real time. That doesn't sound very fun to read, but it is, I promise.
It is.
I
promise it's good.
I promise it's really fun. No, this is the most fun book I've ever written. And so, of course, then all of Caroline and Sloan and Emerson have all evacuated different places. And so of course they have to get back to Peachtree Bluff and help rebuild just in time for the holiday season. So it's a very Christmassy feel good story. But there's some real stuff in it too. And I love the hurricane part. So I think it was the perfect, you need a little bit of tension in a Christmas book. And I think it was a good way to start it off.
Have you had people reach out to you since reading Under the Southern Sky who've gone through IVF or even some of your other stories? Have you had real people connect and be oh my gosh, that's my story, or I've done this?
Totally. More than any of my other books, Dear Carolina was an adoption story. Okay. I've had so many people to this day, I'll have people write me and tell me things. Some of them so bizarre that you're just wow. Just to think about how something can come into someone's life in that way. And that it's amazing. But yes, I have gotten a lot of notes about it. And you're always worried when you write about something like that is a very sensitive topic for people. But I haven't gotten any negative feedback so far. So that's good. But I've gotten a lot of oh my gosh, we're going through this and, or this happened to my daughter, or this happened to my friend, or we're trying to figure out what to do with our embryos. And this is what we ended up doing. And I've just heard a lot of people's really interesting stories, which I love.
How do you choose author? You have the coolest names in your book. I feel if anyone's looking for a baby name, they just need to go read your stories. How do you pick all these cool names?
Okay. So it depends. It's so bizarre because sometimes I feel I'll write a whole book and I know the character's name isn't right. I just The Wedding Veil. I wrote the whole book and the character's name was Keaton because that's what I wanted Amelia's name to be in Under the Southern Sky. My editor didn't want it to be that. So I changed her name and I was I'm going to use Keaton. Darn it. I love that name. Right, and then I got to the whole end of the book and I was well, her name's just not Keaton. That's not who she is. Yeah. So I changed her name to Julia. And I was riding down the road today thinking, God, she's such a Julia. That's the perfect name for her. But it is interesting how you get to know them and you're oh yeah, that's what their name should be. The funny thing for Peachtree Bluff, this is one of my favorite stories, but I had a super insane deadline. I think I had to write the first draft of Slightly South of Simple in 12 weeks, which now would not have felt so much, but that was my 3rd book. So that was a tall order. And I was really nervous about doing it. And I remember I knew the story in my head. I knew what I was going to write. And I just had to like go. I mean, there was no thinking about it. I just had to write and go. And I remember saying to my mom, like, okay, these are the characters. I need you to find names. And she literally emailed me and was like, these are the characters' names.
That
So
is
she,
so cool.
isn't that funny? So she named Ansley, Caroline, Sloan, and Emerson. And I had a little girl named Carolina in my first book. And I remember saying, like, do we think that that's too close to Caroline? And then like my editorial team that had already read the book was like, oh, she has to be Caroline. Like that's her only possible name. She could never be anything else.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So
it's funny how that happens. Cause when I wrote Betty Confetti, the kid's name was Ellie. And then I just was like going along and like writing the story. And then they were like, and it had a dumb title, like turn your mistakes into confetti. Like it wasn't even like great or cute. That. And whenever we sat down, like, you know, to finalize everything, and they were like, we feel like most kids' books have like a rhymey title, and like it's all about the kid, it's all about the character. And they're like, we were thinking like something that rhymed with confetti, and my grandma's name was Betty. And so Betty Confetti, and it was like when we said it, I mean, that was like the first one. There's not that many, like Teddy, Freddie, you know. Letty.
That's so funny though, because I just always assumed that it was Betty Confetti.
Yep, it wasn't. And like it was just so special because like she passed away right before my book tour in 2019. And so the book's not about her, but it's really cool to honor her in that way, to like have her name on there. I feel like she'd be really pumped. And so I'm like you, I could never, now that she's Betty, I could never, that's her name. Like I could never think of any other name like that. It's funny how they kind of like write their own name and name themselves.
Yeah, isn't that funny? I know, and she seems like a Betty now.
That's all she wrote. That's who it's got to be. So you have a couple more logistical questions that I will shoot your way. And then I wanted to give y'all time. We've got about 5 more minutes. If anybody else had a burning question for Kristy, the New York Times bestselling author right here in our midst. She is amazing. Something that y'all should know about her is that she is just as great in real life. Like we've been friends for 7 or 8 years now. And she is just as down to earth, like just as amazing, just as beautiful as you would think she is. And I just feel honored and privileged to be able to call you like a real life true friend. And I am grateful every day that we went to that conference in Chapel Hill.
Me too. I mean, talk about making things happen.
We made it happen.
Well, I feel the exact same way. You're amazing. You've just been so, and it is always like really nice. I don't know if you feel like this, but sometimes it's, there aren't as many people in your life.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say this, but you don't, it's nice to have someone that you can celebrate with and not feel like
bragging or like you're
exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Like that.
Exactly.
No, so, I'm like your hype squad anytime.
Hype squad is good.
Will you please repeat the book that you just read about the Italian coast? What was that called?
Oh, it's called Lizzie and Dante, and it's by Mary Bly.
Okay. And then will some of the Friends and Fictions events in Beaufort be virtual also, or is it all going to be in person?
Kind of. So we're doing like a 7 p.m. Friends and Fiction Live, but someone got really nervous about the logistics because we're not all only 4 of us are going to be there. And then one of us is going to be at home. And then we have 2 guests that are going to be elsewhere. And I was like, I can't. And we was talking with the tech crew and we were like, if one little thing goes wrong, like this whole thing is going to fall apart and we're going to be live and it's not going to work. So we're actually going to pre-record it. So it will, it will
be a virtual option. It just won't
there will be a virtual option for that one. And really and truly, it's probably the event that we'll do 4 times because we have, different audiences at every event. So yes, kind of, yes.
I love this question and I bet that we don't have the same answer, but when you write, do you write on pen and paper first or do you just write it on your computer? And then do you have a routine when you start to write?
Okay, and you answer that first
quickly because I wrote Betty Confetti like literally with pen and paper by hand. Like I knew what I wanted to say, which I mean, it got edited and it got way better over the course of time. There were 5 drafts of her, but I wrote it with pen and paper. That's just like my medium and like how I can think fast. And I remember emailing my dad one night at like 2:30 in the morning. And I'm like, I just wrote a book. Like I wrote my children's book and I was like, I would send it to you, but I haven't typed it yet. And then praising positivity, I wrote all of the 100 ideas on Post-it notes. Like I had like all these different colorful Post-its and I wrote all of the ideas on Post-its. And then I took the Post-its to the computer to type it up. I don't feel creative at a laptop yet. I need to like work that muscle. So
no, I don't think you do, because, you know, they say that you're more creative on pen and paper. Like you're supposed to be, like, psychologically. I like, if you said to me, you have to write a book on pen and paper, it just would never happen. Like and I'll like start to write things and I'm like, that sounds horrible. Like, I don't know what it is. There's something about like my fingers being on the keys. And I don't know if it's something about journalism school and like, that was how we, you know, we had to write everything on the computer. I don't know what it is, but I have to be like attached. And I wish I didn't, because like Kristen Hanna takes her, and Ellen Hildebrand does this too. They take their notes down and they like sit on the beach and they like handwrite their books and then they go back and type them. And I think that's so great because, one, you can like sit outside in a beautiful place and see. And two, because it's like you're kind of editing as you're going along a little bit, where I am very much like write, edit. But yeah, I just can't do it. So
it's so funny. Yeah. Well, it makes me feel better that these like famous writers do it the old
yes, they do it your way. So I'm the outlier. It's me.
I love it. I'd say I was like, do you have to have a routine like to like do? I like to have like music on in the background, but not songs I know that I can sing to. Like it's better if it's like random or instrumental, not like ones I know the words to.
Yep. I love it.
So we're going to pass it back to Elaine, but just thank you so much for just opening and sharing with everybody. Thank y'all all for joining us. It's been so much.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan. You are the greatest. Thanks for doing this with me. And thanks to UNC Library for having us, and to everybody who came. So fun.
Well, thank you, Kristy, and thank you, Megan, for a really just engaging evening. I could just listen to you talk all the time about your books and your writing. And so I just really want to thank you. And I want to thank all of you out in our audience for joining us. This is actually our last event in our Well-Read series this spring. But I do want to remind you to get copies of Under the Southern Sky and Betty Confetti wherever books are sold. I do know that Under the Southern Sky is available at Flyleaf Books in Chapel Hill. And I just wanted to let you know that if you want to know more about the Carolina Library's events, you can go to library.unc.edu. And if you also like to make a gift in support of the libraries, you can go to that website, library.unc.edu, and go down to the bottom and you can help support the libraries. And so I just want to thank Megan and Kristy one more time, and I want to thank all of you and have a wonderful evening. Good night.